Good Shabbos, camera. Good Shabbos to my friends, or whoever my early friends are who may be watching. Getting here at 9:30 on the dot would be very impressive. So I'm going to assume it's a lot of you, but all joking aside, I'm happy to be back here. Happy to be in front of our Torah, in front of all of you, and a chance to daven together. So we're going to get right to it. We're on page 186. We'll begin our service with thanks and gratitude. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Modeh ani lefanecha Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabba emunatecha. Turn now to page 192. Ma tovu. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov Mishkenotecha Israel. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov Mishkenotecha Israel. We'll turn now to page 194 and read together in Hebrew at the top of the page. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher yatzar et hadam bechokma ubaravo nekavim nekavim chalulim chalulim galui v'yadua lifnei chisei chavodecha she'im yipatech echad mehem o yisatem echad mehem yefshar lehitkayem u'la'amod lefanecha. Baruch atah Adonai rofech chol basar mafli la'asot. Page 196. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehora tehorai. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me, and you protect it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you, Adonai, my God and God of my ancestors, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind. Baruch atah Adonai, asher biyado nefesh kol chai veruach kol v'saish. You rise, embody your spirit as we turn to page 198. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan l'sachri bina lafin me'yo ve'layla. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam bokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish harumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoteh la'ahev koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavir shenam einai utnuma me'apapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Adas Israel b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Adas Israel b'tifara. Good Shabbos, Howard.
Shabbos, boy, you must have started early.
I started exactly on time. Exactly, I'm not.
Already?
It's interesting actually because now I got a clock in front of me, so I can see how long it takes to get from that one. That one's not so trustworthy. This one over here a little bit. Like the hat again, very nice. Now you know what though? I realized, when are you leaving?
The first.
So I think this is our last Shabbos together because next week is Christmas, so there's no imp. It'll be on virtual stuff, but. So you got to take the Aliyah today. That's the deal. If Marty's here, you and Marty do it together.
All right.
Oh, that's sad. That's
wow.
sad. All right. Well, we'll daven well.
I was wondering about Christmas.
Yeah. No. It's interesting. All right. We're on page 204. I think it's very appropriate as Howard is picking up some Torahs to bring for others. We'll do our blessing for the study of Torah.
All right.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. O Adonai our God, let the words of Torah be sweet in our mouths and the mouths of your people Israel, so that we, our descendants, and the descendants of all your people Israel may know you by studying your Torah for its own sake. Blessed are you, Adonai, who teaches Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai hamelamed Torah lamo Yisrael. Page 206. Elu demarim she'ein lahem shiur, shalom ochel perotehem ba'olam hazeh, v'keren kayemet lo le'olam haba, ve'elu hen kibud avaim ugmilut chasadim, v'hashkamat beit hamidrash shacharit ve'aravit, v'hachnasat orchim u'bikur cholim, v'hachnasat kala l'beit hamet, V'yun tefilah, v'havat shalom ben adam la'chavero, v'talmud Torah keneged kulam. Sorry, I know you just got cozy, but we're going to rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 212. Baruch shehamar v'haya ha'olam baruch hu, baruch oseh v'reshit, Baruch Omer v'Yosef, Baruch Ozer u'Mekayem, Baruch Merachem al haaretz, Baruch Merachem al habriot, Baruch Meshalem Sachar Tov l'Reav, Baruch Chalad v'Kayam lanetzach, Baruch Podeh u'Matzil, Baruch Shemo, B'shvachot u'B'zmirot Negadelcha, ונשבחך נפארך ונזכיר שמך ונמליכך מלכנו אלוהינו יחיד חי העולמים מלך משובח ומפואר עד שמו הגדול ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מהולל לתשבחו. Please be seated. We're now on page 214. Mizmor Shilem Shabbat. Tov lehodol Adonai. Tov lehodol Adonai, ulezamer leshimcha elyon. Tov lehodol Adonai, lehagid b'boker chasdecha, lehagid b'boker chasdecha, ve'emunatcha b'halelot, ve'emunatcha b'halelot, tov lehodot Adonai, alei asur v'alei nabel, alei higayon v'chinor, ki simchtani Adonai b'po'alecha, V'masei yadecha ranen, magalu ma'asecha yam, me'od amku machshevotecha, magalu ma'asecha yam, me'od amku machshevotecha. Magalu מעשיך מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך, עוד יהללוך. אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יהללוך, עוד יהללוך. סלה ואנחנו נברך יה מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם, מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה, 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 hallelujah. Page 218. Hallelujah, 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 el bekodsho, hallelujah, bekiahuzo, hallelujah, bigurotav, hallelujah, kerokulo, hallelujah, 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 beteka shofar, hallelujah, benebel bechinor, hallelujah, betofu machol, hallelujah, beminim behugav, hallelujah, 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 betziatzalei shama, hallelujah, betziatzalei trua, kol hanshama tehalelia, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Nishmat kol echai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Continue silently. We're on page 220. Ilufinu male shira kayam, ulshoneinu rina kamon galav, lesiftotenu shevach kemarcheve rakiyam, veinenu meirot kashemesh vechayareach, veyadenu frusot kenishrei shamayim, ורגלינו קלות כהילות, אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו. We're now on page 222, the middle paragraph in Hebrew. Shochenan marom v'kadosh shemo v'chaturanenu tzadikim b'Adonai la yesharim nava tehila befi yesharim tihitalalu divrei tzadikim Tihit barach u'bilshon chasidim, Tihit romamu v'kerev kedoshim, Tihit kadash ufma kehalot, Rivevot amcha beit, Yisrael v'herina yitbar, Shimcha malkeinu bechol dor, v'ador yababai, yababai, bye, bye, bye. Yababai, yababai, bye, 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 yababai, bye, bye, bye. Ayababai, yababai, bye, bye. Arise in body or spirit for the concluding blessing of Bezukah de Zimra on page 223, and then remain standing through the next pages, the Chatzi Kaddish and the Baruch. Yishtabach shimecha la'ad malkeinu, ha'el ha'melech ha'gadol v'ha'kadosh b'shamayim u'ba'aretz, ki lecha na'e Adonai Eloheinu Elokei avoteinu ve'imotenu, she'ushvacha alav v'zimra u'zumemshala ha'netzach, Gedula u'kura, tila v'tiferet, kedusha u'malchut, brachot ve'hodaot, me'ata ve'ad olam, baruch atah Adonai, El melech gadol v'tishmachot, el ahodaot adaron niflaot, avocher b'shirei zimra, melech el chei ha'olamim. All right, Movable Morning. Watch those chairs behind you there. Okay, good to see you, Morning.
Let's go.
Good Shabbos.
Okay.
Brother Schwatzman.
Good Friday, Carol.
All right, so Morning, I told Howard, you guys have to have the Aliyah today because you're gonna go to Florida and we don't have services here next week, so. All right, don't let, even if we get, the president walks in, you guys get the Aliyah. That's the deal.
Take whatever seat we want.
For you guys, you get VIP treatment. We are always. Although the truth is, VIP treatment for the two of you, I think, is the last row, right? That's, Schwatzky's always put the others first, from what I've learned. All right, so you guys get settled. We're on page 220. 224 Chatzah. Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah Be'amad Dirachirtei Be'amlich Malchutei B'chayechonu B'yamechonu B'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael B'hagala U'bizman Karim V'yimeru Amen Yeshmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'alam Yamei Al-Mayam Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitvar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemehei dekucha b'richu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiram be'alma v'imeru amen barechu et Adonai hamevorach Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Vaed. Okay, we're now on page 228. We'll read together in English at the bottom and then the three lines in Hebrew above. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things. In mercy you illumine the world and those who live upon it. In your goodness you daily renew creation. How numerous are your works, Adonai, in wisdom you form them all, filling the earth with your creatures. Be praised, Adonai, our God, for the excellent work of your hands, and for the lights you created, may they glorify you. Shine a new light upon Zion, that we all may swiftly merit its radiance. Praised are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. Or Chadash, Al Tzion Tahir. Or Chadash, Al Tzion Tahir. Benizkechu lanu me'era le'oro. Benizkechu lanu me'era le'oro. Yadadai bim bim bam, yadadai bim bam, yadadai bim bim bam, yadadai. Yadadai bim bim bam, yadadai bim bam, yadadai bim bim bam, yadadai baruch atah Adonai yotzer hameorot. Turn now to page 230. We'll read together in English at the top and then the Hebrew at the bottom. How deeply you have loved us, Adonai, our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion. On account of our forebears whose trust led you to teach in the laws of life, be gracious to us, teaching us as well. O merciful one, have mercy on us by making us able to understand and discern, to heed, learn, and teach, and lovingly to observe, perform, and fulfill all that is in your Torah. Ve'aherenu b'toratecha v'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha ve'yachel levaveinu le'ahava u'yirah et shemecha ve'lo nevosh ve'lo nikalim ve'lo nikashel le'olam Kodshecha Hagadol v'Hanora Batachnu Nagila v'nismecha v'yeshuatecha v'havienu le'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz v'hetolichenu kol memihut le'artzeinu. Yel poel Yeshua Tata Ubanu Bacharta Ve'kerahavtanu le'shimcha Hagadol Selah Bemet Leodot Lecha Yechedcha B'Yahava Baruch Atah Adonai Hamocher B'Amo Yisrael Be'Avaha. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And then we're on page 234. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol lebavcha b'chol nafshecha u'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele Asher Anochi Metzavcha Hayom Al Levavecha Veshinata Levanecha V'dibarta Bam V'shiftecha B'veitecha U'lechtecha V'aderech U'shochbecha U'kumecha U'shartam Leot Ayadecha V'hayu Letotafot B'neinecha U'chtavta Al Mezuzot Beitecha U'visharecha. On page 236. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael v'amarta lehem v'asu lahem tzitzit al kanfei bigdeihem ledorotam v'nanu al tzitzit hakanah b'tiot techelet v'haya lachem letzitzit v'ritem oto Uschartem et kol mitzvot Adonai v'asitem otam v'lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem asher atem zonim achareihem למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem, Emet. We're now on page 238, 4 lines up from the bottom in Hebrew. Tehillah le'elyon baruch hu mevorach Moshe u'Miriam u'bnei Yisrael lechanu shir ha besimcha rabba ve'amru chulam mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh nora te'iloto sefer lev yain la 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 shira chadasha shibchu geulim לשמחה שפתיים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופדחנו מחר יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. We'll begin the Amidah together on page 242 and then continue silently. As always, please go at your own pace, and when you are finished, you may be seated. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. All right, if you're still davening your silent Amidah, please continue and finish that, and then you can catch up. Those that are finished, we'll turn to page 324 for the repetition. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah El HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanoma El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol v'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot u'Mevii Geula Livnei Bneihem Leman Shemo B'Ahava Melech Chozer Moshiach U'Makim Baruch Atah Adonai Magen Abraham Lezrat Sarah אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומרהיב הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, צומח נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, לשני עפר, מי כמוך בגבורות, ומדו מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני לחיי המתים. We're on page 326. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, ולא כל הארץ כבודו. אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. אחד אלוהינו אבינו מלכנו, ומושיענו והוא ישמיענו, ורחמיו לעיני כל חי. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור. Hallelujah. Page 328. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Please be seated, page 329 at the very top. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת קורא עונג שבת. מקדשי שבי שבת, כולם ישמעו ויתענגו מטובך שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו שבת, חמדת ימים לא תוקעת השבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. זכר למעשה בראשית שבת, זכר למעשה בראשית שבת. ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי 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 שבת וקורא עונג שבת. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, רצה רצה במנוחתנו, קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בתורתך, שבנו מטובך ושמחנו תשועתך, וטהר ליבנו לאהובתך באמת והנחילנו. אדוני אלוהינו Ay, nay, nay, lay, 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 la, 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 lay, 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 la, 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 lay. Ya lay, la, lay, lay, la, 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 lay, lay, lay. Ya lay, la, lay, lay, la, lay, lay, lay. V'yahava ratzon Shabbat kodshecha, reinu chuva Yisrael, mekadshe shemecha, baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. Let's read together in English on page 330. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility that we may perceive our own faults and grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. Baruch atah Adonai she'odcha levadcha b'ranavu. Turn to page 332 at the very bottom of the page. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. Modim anachnu. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, Modim anachnu. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, Modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression. Modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared. Modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom. Modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose. Modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shimcha ulachana'el lehodot. Page 334. Sim shalom tova ubracha ben ma'achesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael hamecha Varcheinu yotzreinu kulanu kechad ve'or panecha ki be'or panecha natata lanu Adonai Eloheinu. Sim shalom tova ubracha chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael hamecha Torat chaim ve'ahavat chesed u'tzedaka u'bracha ve'rachamim v'chaim v'shalom. Sim shalom tova u'bracha chen v'chesed ve'rachamim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael hamecha V'tov einecha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שים שלום טובה וברכה חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל ושלום. Let's read together on the top of page 337. Prayer is not purely an act. All things pray and all things pour forth their souls. The heavens pray, the earth prays, every creature and every living thing. In all life there is longing. Creation is itself but a longing, a kind of prayer to the Almighty. What are the clouds, the rising and the setting of the sun, the soft radiance of the moon and the gentleness of the night? What are the flashes of the human mind and the storms of the human heart? They are all prayers, the wordless outpouring of boundless longing for God. Ohoseh shalom bimrama, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yehoshvei Tevel. Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. All right, good Shabbos, everybody. Good Shabbos. End of a tour. Well, so timing is good, right? We at least finished one book before you guys leave for Florida. By the time you come back, it'll probably be Vayikra, I guess, somewhere in there. Yeah. So where do you guys go to shul when you're down there? Is there anywhere that you go? Yeah. Is there a good shul in that part of Florida where you guys end up?
I'm gonna find out what's in bureau.
Okay, because you got to tell me where you're going, and I will try to find some people that I trust down there if I can.
There is a shul in Sarasota. Beth Shalom.
But they kind of come up with more creative names for these places, though. They're all Beth Shalom, right?
It's a good thing.
That's is it conservative or reform? Sounds conservative. Beth Shalom is usually conservative. Yeah.
There is a reform on that.
Right, I'm sure. In each town, there probably is,
I understand the reform shul is a difficult time.
It's near Publix.
That's it. Everything's near Publix down there. I think.
Very elementary.
Not for you guys. You need something a little more chomer, is what you say, a little more substance,
A lot of Jews on Longboat Key.
Right.
That are from Toronto and Midwestern Chicago.
So that's interesting how when people go to Florida, they end up in the same area as the people that like from. No, it makes sense. You bring it with you, right? Because Florida has no identity of its own. You bring it with you. That seems to be the thing, right? You bring Delhi with you. That's
Zero Beach is
much
more low key.
Low key is good. That's.
I think there's a shul. Ann thinks there's 3 or 4 SGTs.
Well, look, anywhere I'm sure there's a Chabad. Whether there's a,
Dodger Town.
Interesting. There's a lot I don't know about Florida, but no, I was because I was joking with Len Harlan and Fleur because when Neil and I went to that World Jewish Congress dinner, and he said that he was down in Florida. And I said, I realized this at this point, it's like an inversion, right? As we got more people down in Florida, so I should come down there for a month. We'll all hang out, Len said he'd let me use the house. We would just bring a Torah down and then they call it a day.
I don't know how many shuls in Palm Beach.
How many shuls are not in Palm Beach? I have no idea. What the funny thing to me is when the one time we stayed at one of these places in Fort Lauderdale, I think, or somewhere, or West Palm, and you drive by these giant complexes, right? Miles long, big walls on the outside. And then somebody told me that there are shuls within those places, right? That there's like a community shul within the.
I'm thinking of my place. I don't think so. It's huge.
It's wild. It's wild. I could take you 20 minutes just to get from your house to the front of the complex, But
so
I understand. Well,
ask the golf club if there's a shul.
If they need an occasional rabbi, who to call. So on to more germane things, I guess. Our ending of the book and our study again of Joseph and his brothers. And this is a fascinating parsha, which we'll talk a little more in detail of Jacob's quote unquote blessings for his children. It's easier to do that really when you have some time to kind of go line by line. But I wanted to focus actually on something which is sort of, you wouldn't know that anything was happening unless you really pay very close attention. So just to give the page numbers, when we start reading, it'll be page 295 in the women's commentary, and then it will be 315 in the cloud. Very good, Heather. Very good. So what we're going to read is the end of the book, right? Makes sense. But what happens in this, is that you again, right, as we talked about last week, the sort of tentative relationship between Joseph and his brothers and the reconciliation. But even in that reconciliation is this sort of dance that they play between, are they being genuine, right? Is everybody being genuine, or is everybody being, sort of unsure of, right? But then we get to really, Jacob passes away. There is a whole sort of funeral and then there is another at the end of the book. Really, is Joseph and his brothers talking again. So, beginning of verse 14, it says, Joseph then returned to Egypt, he, his brothers, and all who had gone with him to bury his father. And after burying his father, Joseph's brothers, seeing that their father was dead. Okay, so remember again, we were talking about last week, right? That Jacob, whether he realizes it or not, for the brothers, is sort of a buffer. It's probably a better word for this, right? A guarantor of their safety. And once he's gone, now the first thing they say is, oh, maybe Joseph wasn't doing what he could have done all along because his father's still alive. Everybody's, right under and it would break his heart or whatever it might have been. But now that he's not around, how do we know, right? As they say, Joseph's brothers seeing their father is dead. How do we know? Perhaps Joseph still bears an enmity and intends to repay us for all the harm that we inflicted upon him. So then this next thing happens. So they brought a charge to Joseph saying, quote, your father left this charge. A charge in this case, right, is a sort of forceful instruction. Okay, left this charge before his death, saying, thus shall you say to Joseph, please, I beg of you, forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, though they inflicted harm upon you, yet now please forgive the transgression of the servants of your father's God. Okay, and then, right, nice thing, Joseph then, weeps and says, okay, and of course, and there's all this sort of pageantry of it all. And ultimately speaking, Joseph really, there's no indication whatsoever that he ever had any intention to do them any harm. Okay, but he's moved by this because they're basically saying, well, it was, their father's dying wish was to not do damage to each other, right? To end this sort of fratricide and fear. Now, here's the only problem, right? This would otherwise seem to be a really wonderful sort of ending to the whole story. However, there is no indication anywhere in the Torah that Jacob actually ever said that. Okay, so there's no indication at all that, right? He may have felt it. He may have felt it, and he may have been concerned about it, and he may have, right? The Torah only gives us what the Torah gives us, but it's very possible, right, that Jacob had a conversation with the brothers and said exactly that, and they were just passing on the message. However, right, because there is no factual basis for it, there's nothing in the text that says it. What we have, right, is the cynical response to this, which is that they made this up. As if the guarantor is dead, then the ghost of the guarantor, right, can still live, right? In other words, he doesn't have to be alive for his guarantee of their safety to perpetuate, so long as they quote him saying, right, that they should ask the brother Joseph to forgive them and all of that. So here then we have a kind of interesting tendency of the rabbis. What they do is they'll take an example in the Torah and they'll use it and create a paradigm around it. And they'll say that, it's the question ultimately, really what's taking place here, right? Is it acceptable? Is it ever okay to lie, right? Is it ever okay to bend the truth? Is it ever okay to withhold information or anything like that? Which becomes the basis, quite frankly, of a lot of work. If you ever decide to read it, the Chafetz Chaim wrote really his entire treatise on this idea of, how to use our mouths and Lashon Hara and what's acceptable and what's not, and lying and not lying. But if you look in the women's commentary, it's sort of doing the work for us, but is pointing us towards a conversation about this in the Talmud and Yevamot, in which, right, we have this phrase, and the liner note here in the women's commentary says, given that the narrative did not mention Jacob's having dispatched this exact message, Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, so Rabbi Eliezer in this case, very significant, Shimon Bar Yochai is extremely important. So these are not like outlier rabbis, right? In the Talmud, these are significant rabbinic decisors, so their words mean a lot. So Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, sees this verse as proof that one may alter another person's words, okay, not them themselves lying, but alter another person's words for the sake of peace, okay? And what, this is a phrase I know Howard loves and I do too, shalom bayis, right? Okay, shalom bayis means basically peace in the home. And it becomes actually a really powerful piece of sort of pseudo halakha. It's not halakha in the sense that there is a mitzvah, so to speak, to create, not that I'm aware of, to create Shalom Bayit, because that's too hard of a concept to be able to exist within a legal pretense, right? How do you guarantee that you could always have peace in your home? No, but maybe there's somebody in the world who's married and never had, a marital disagreement or something with their kids. Maybe, right? I'm not even sure. Moses didn't even. Okay, so the point is that it's almost impossible to hold it to a standard of halakha, of law, but it becomes as if law. It's one of these sort of it exists alongside it. And the idea is that Shalom Bayit overrides many other things that may or may not be the general principle. So the general principle is don't lie, don't manipulate, don't change people's words, don't do anything if you're doing it for nefarious purposes, right? If you're doing it for self-preservation. But if you are thinking about the concept of shalom, right, the concept of peace and of wholeness, in this case, right, them fudging things a little bit, if not entirely creating and the truth is, again, from context, we can know that is, in fact, Jacob's wish, right? There's no question that Jacob would not want his children to continue to have an animosity towards each other, to hurt each other, right? That's not the stretch here. What they just did is they put words in his mouth, right? And in normal circumstances, that would be a no-no in almost every conceivable way. But when it comes to matters of shalom, when it comes to matters of creating the possibility of shalom, right, of peace, of wholeness, of a sense, really, again, of the possibility that everyone can move forward, then we get to see a little bit of an easing, a little bit of a break in what would otherwise be a hard and fast rule, right, a hard and fast obligation, which is be truthful in your words. And again, so much of this story, from beginning to end, involves so much, right, lying, outright lying, violence, manipulation. Joseph is no different than his brothers, right? Remember the whole last couple parshas we read, right? He toyed with them, right? He did all sorts of stuff to mess with them. And he really only, when he gets sort of overwhelmed by emotions, does he remember he's a human being and he tells them the truth. But nobody in this story really, quite frankly, other than probably Benjamin, comes out, or Ephraim and Manasseh, right? Are the only ones who come out without any inkling that they have been, of this sort. But we learn, again, that sometimes there may be a larger principle at play. And that sometimes, right, and I think that any of us have ever been in a situation where, for example, we're the middle ground between two warring parties, right? And you become the messenger between the two, right? Two aren't talking to each other. Okay, so in the translation, it's like that old game of telephone, right? When you're playing with your kid and you pass the message from one person to the next and the next. Sometimes it's not even an intention to lie or to manipulate. It's just a form of translation. Right? So person A may say something in a rather abrupt or abrasive kind of way, but you can then take what they said and get to the essence of it and transmit the essence of it as opposed to all the vitriol around it. And thereby you start to create the circumstances where party A and party B can talk to each other again. And this exists on an interpersonal level, right? Within households, within friendships, within families. It also exists on national levels, right? The great challenge of peace work, right, of any kind of conflict resolution, is just getting people to be able to talk to each other. If you get people in the room together, there is a good track record of being able to come out eventually with a successful agreement. But just getting people to the table, right? The whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict today hasn't moved forward in 20-something odd years because they just don't trust each other anymore. They won't even sit in the same room together and they won't negotiate anything. And we see the results of that is that 20 years go by. And what happens, right? The vitriol gets worse, the hatred gets worse, the pain gets worse, and now a whole nother generation has to absorb it. So here, in this one moment, we can forgive the brothers, according to Rabbi Eliezer, because their intention, at least seemingly, was to preserve the state of peace that started to create itself in last week's portion and carry over to now. And because I think, in truth, everybody involved understood that this really was Jacob's wish. That in the end, that is really the goal, I think, of every parent, is that their children and their children's children should be as family, right? And to live in peace. It doesn't mean agreement. It doesn't mean even love. Remember that there is a word for love. Okay, shalom is not that. Peace doesn't even really have anything to do with that. You can have peace without having love. It's nice when they both exist. Okay, but the reality is, peace is the concept of making sure that everybody feels whole. That everybody in the end feels that they are, part of the puzzle and that they are not being ostracized and they're not being, their past indiscretions held above their head for the rest of their lives either. So I think, again, it's a complex narrative from beginning to end, and we've read about it now for 4 weeks. But as we come to its conclusion, I think every year, right, the lessons of this story are more and more powerful and more necessary. And I think that this is a really good one. And another good excuse to use our commentaries, both our Women's Torah commentary and our Plat Chumash, because you just don't know, right? You might find something really, and if you're a Hertz Chumash person or an Eitz Chaim person, right, there are so many commentaries and so many things that are so available. It's just a wonderful thing. So with that, I wish our camera a good Shabbos. I wish the Schwarzky brothers a good Shabbos. And as it turns out, again, you're our Aliyah today, right? Even if you tried to give it away, you couldn't give it away. So, yeah. All right, so we're going to turn to page 362, Seder Kriyat Torah, will rise and body your spirit. Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kemasecha malchutcha malchut, kol olamim u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'hador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Adonai oz lamo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo b'shalom. Abba harachamim, eitiva v'rtzoncha etzion. Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, ki b'cha levad batachnu. Melech el Ram v'nisad on olamim. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Udevar Adonai miYerushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah Torah. Baruch shenatan Torah Torah le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo.
Eloheinu Kadosh Adonai Shema.
Gadol Adonai Tiuner Homema Shemo Yachdav. Lecha Adonai Hagedula Ve'Hagedura Ve'Hatiferet Ve'Hanetzach Ve'Hahod Ki Chol B'Shamayim U'Va'aretz Ki Chol B'Shamayim U'Va'aretz Lecha Adonai Hamamlacha Ve'amid Na'aseh Lechol Erosh. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu le'hakodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu le'hakodsho. Okay, please be seated. Do you guys want the big placardy thing, or you got the? I think you got it. Okay, so Yamod, which one's the older? Okay, Michael ben Chananya, Tzvi Hirsch ben Chananya, Lalia Harishana. Baruch Adonai Amarach Le'olam Va'ed. Amen. Vayashov Yosef Mitzraymahu vechav vechol ha'olim ito likbor et aviv. It's chapter 50, verse 14. אחרי קוברו את אביו, ויראו אחי יוסף כי מת אביהם, ויאמרו לו ישטמנו יוסף, והשם ישיב לנו את כל הרעה אשר גמלנו אותו. ויצבו אל יוסף לאמור, אביך ציווה לפני מותו לאמור, כה תאמרו ליוסף, נעשה נא פשע אחיך וחטאתם, כי רעה גמלוך, ואתה שנא לפשע עבדי אלוהי אביך. ויפק יוסף בדברם אליו, וילכו גם אחיו, ויפלו לפניו, ויאמרו, הננו לך לעבדים. ויאמר עליהם יוסף, אל תראו כי החטאת אלוהים אני, ואתם חשבתם עלי רעה, אלוהים חשבה לטובה למען הסוף. כיום הזה לחיות עם רב, ועתה אל תראו אנוכי אכלכל אתכם ואת אפכם, וינחם אותם, וידבר על ליבם. וישב יוסף במצרים הוא ובית אביו, ויחי יוסף 110 שנים. וירא יוסף לאפרים בני שלשים, גם בני מכיר בן מנשה יולדו על ברכי יוסף. ויאמר יוסף אל אחיו, אנוכי מת, ואלוהים פוקד יפקוד אתכם, והעלה אתכם מן הארץ הזאת אל הארץ אשר נשבע לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב. וישבע יוסף את בני ישראל לאמור, פקוד יפקוד אלוהים אתכם, והעליתם את עצמותי מזה. וימות יוסף בן 110 שנים, ויחנתו אותו, וישם בארון במצרים. אמן. חזק חזק ונתחזק. יישר כוח, boys. Well done. Well, you know, it's funny that I was like, why does this all seem so familiar to me? And then I remembered that for us, our mincha reading on Yom Kippur is the end of the book. There are times, you know, because like every year I'm learning new Torah, so but it's amazing how much it sticks with you from reading to reading. And by afternoon, you switch back to regular trope. The hard thing for me is when we get to the section of the Torah that I read on Chag, and I read in a regular year because the trope changes. So I have to remember, what was really good with it is Jan. Jan learned it, I think, if I remember correctly, either from Marshall at BJ or somewhere, but she's very good with all the different melodies and things. I have one of those brains that unfortunately is pattern based. It's good and bad, but basically if you mess with the pattern, then my brain just goes right out. It's really tough. That's why singing with my dad is tough these days to some degree, because I have all the melodies of what I learned growing up, and the cadence is a little bit different, right? And Torah reading is a little bit different. What I do is something of a combination of standard reform trope and standard conservative trope. Because I like the way that I think the conservatives do the end of the sentence of the Sof Pasuk stuff. And I like the way the reform do other things. So I just over time kind of combine them. So look, whatever works for you, right? That's, No, the melody actually, that's the funny thing. Everybody gets hooked up on the melody. The only thing that matters, truly, the only thing that matters is the pronunciation of the Hebrew. That's it. That melody is really, if you think about it, in a world in which people didn't have a Chumash in front of them or may not have been able to read it even if they wanted to, right? Singing something sounds much better. Imagine going right to an opera and them just saying the words, right? There's something to be said to the melody. It keeps the person interested, right? And so the genius of whatever point in time, and I'm sure actually that there is some sense of this, of when cantillation really came into consideration, and it's much later period than people realize. But Torah reading, actually, the way that it used to happen, like during the period of time where Aramaic was the lingua franca, you would have what's called a meturgaman. Letargem means to translate. So meturgaman was like, remember, you'd be my gabbai standing here. So instead of just gabbai and watching the words, would literally be doing a translation into the lingua franca, because most of the people didn't know the Lashon HaKodesh, they didn't know the Hebrew language. They knew the language they spoke day to day. So the truth is that, for many people, right, your family being Yiddish speakers, right, there were probably a lot of people who spoke Yiddish who maybe didn't necessarily know Hebrew so well, right? And so as a result of it, the Meturgaman actually, and they discuss it at great length in the Talmud about sort of how that's meant to work. I think, didn't Cantor Amanda do that? She would do that thing where she would read a line and then she'd translate it into English. That I have nothing but respect for. That is, she is amazing. She's amazing. Maybe one day I'll get her to come back and visit. Right. Yeah, she would translate it sort of, because she's also, if I remember correctly, she's a native Hebrew speaker also. So, and she's the senior cantor now at Westchester Reform. She was the assistant and then the associate, and that's the senior. And she's, she only came out of school a year before me. That's a big deal, and well deserved. She's really, really quite talented. It's a big shul. It's a big shul. Anyway, so now we finished our Torah reading. We'll take a moment to offer our Mishaberach this morning on page 371 in our prayer books. Mishaberach Avotenu v'Imotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah Hu Yivarech et hacholim ha'elu. We begin by thinking this morning of Steve Rosen, Dina Bat Chana, Benzi, Cecilia Hirsch, Glenn Tinney, Tzipora Ahava, Gittel Bat Shmuel Be'aviva, Bruce Steger, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Jeff Baker, David Tosher, Jim Cohn, Monique Rathbun, Lindsay Epstein, Dolores Michka, Sylvia Orn, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Chaim Leib, Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollack, Jane London, Catherine Guarino, Emuna, Judy Stern, Miriam Cornfield, Roz Brody, Chana Ruth Bat Sarah, Fagel Tzipora Bat Elisheva Bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Adel Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Benachem and Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kossoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klotman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, Leah Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Leah, Justin Banner, Tzipora Ahava Bat Yehudit Rachel, Jane Beard Cass, Amy Cass, Steve Levine, Ira Madras, Ephraim Raphael Ben Esther, Myra Maslin, and Maxine Eisenstadt. Boys, you got anybody?
Aaron Layton, Edward Glixner.
Hakadosh Baruch Hu yimalei rachamim alehem lechalimam u'lerabatam lechazikam v'yishlach lehem mehira refuah shlema min hashamayim refuat hanefesh refuat haguf hashta b'agalav zman kariv v'nomar amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are suffering. May the blessed and holy one be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say together, Amen. El na refana la, el na refana la, el na refana la, refuah shelema, el na refana lo, El Harefanalo, El Harefanalo, Refua Shelema.
Include one person.
Of course you can.
Devora, Cecil, but Israel. I don't know.
That's a good, if you're not sure, right? That's always a good one. Or even B'nai Israel, but of course, it's never too late to add.
Just go back to Israel. Well,
You know, I look out this window
Yeah,
and I think of JCOH with the glass.
yeah, with the glass. Yeah, I mean, look, right? Norman was a good friend of ours, Norman Jaffe, who was the architect, and he, if you like follow synagogues in America, it's in the top 10 list of unique, because the truth is that most synagogues in the end were built to mimic things from where they came from, right? So like you go to Central Synagogue, it's not an accident, right, that it has the Ottoman things at the top and all that stuff. Is because it's a callback, right? And Temple Emmanuel wasn't a callback to a Jewish institution, but it was meant to mimic, right? It's right. Yeah, it's exactly right. It was built from the ground up in that way. And then when you see, like in the 50s and the 60s, there was a style, and you see it, especially in the Midwest. You see this particular style where it's very. I don't know exactly how to describe it. It was meant to be sort of larger, ever expanding, because the numbers were ever expanding and more Jews moving to the suburbs, all these kinds of things. But like there's the one that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, which is really fascinating. I forget where that is. It's somewhere in the Midwest. Chicago, I think, or something like that, right? JCOH's place. And then there's a few of them that are really just very unique spaces. And I grew up going, like that was where I was. And as a kid, it's the only thing about it is it can sometimes feel sort of sterile, right? Because it's designed really with a certain idea in mind. But when you got a little kid and it's cold in there, and it's wintertime and you put your butt on a piece of hard wood, doesn't always necessarily feel right. So I remember, like, just as a sort of point of contrast, like walking into Adas for the first time, right? And walking into that sanctuary is the same response that most people have the first time they go in there. Is it feels like they're stepping back in time, right? And for people who actually have a memory of their childhood shtibel, little shul that was on their block or whatever it might be, right? If you go to like the Eldridge Street Synagogue, right? Obviously much more ornate, a lot of that stuff going on, but that style of sort of thin and long, right? Women's balcony at the top, right? All those kinds of things. I just, Lee had a vision as an aside to have a movable bema so that we could have a bema in the center of, you remember one of those earlier iterations and he had this idea because the original shul for us, right? The bema was in the center of the room, like most places. And he pointed out, and it's true, that it has a perfect acoustic spot because it's pre-microphones, right? Pre-amplification. So that, Shaliach Tzibor is standing right in the best spot in the room and they're singing and it's bouncing off the walls and the ceilings. But I know what you mean, right? When you had, that was the whole idea, I think, that Norman had for that sanctuary, was in those moments where the mind drifts. Most synagogues are stained glass windows, and stained glass windows mean that you don't see out, right? You see only the image that you want to be seen. But the truth is that there's, I forget where it is, whether it's Midrash or whether it's Talmud, but there's a thing that says that actually that every synagogue is required to have windows, and in particular to have windows so that people can, right, not just the people inside can see out, but people walking by can see in. It's this whole very interesting stuff. And so I think there is something to be said. But Woodlands actually has a similar thing. Where when I was up with Billy, they have a beautiful glass window, all at the behind the like the Aron is right here and everything behind it is glass. So I was there for a couple services where it's snowing in the background. It's lovely. And when I go to work here and I go to my office, I love looking at that window. I think it's it's beautiful. All right, so
with the leaves now.
Yeah, no, this is my time of year. I'm a fall person. I like this is exactly my right. It's still fall. Well, we're kids. We're not exactly at the end. And when you get here, you get here. That's the beauty of it. I know. Important things. So this morning's Haftarah is on page 323 in our Plout Chumash if you're following. If you're following in other forms, it's the first book of Kings, chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. 323. And so this is again where the Haftarahs have sometimes they have better connections to what we read in the Torah portion than others. This one is pretty obvious, as we just read about the end of Jacob's life and about how he interacted with his children in those last moments. Here we get basically the end of King David's life, and this is one where King David is King David to the very end, just as Jacob is Jacob to the very end. But what I mean by that is that their personalities, shine through, and best qualities and some of their less good qualities, right? As is the case. And actually, my teacher, my first teacher in school many years ago, was Rabbi Dov Luria, wrote something brilliant, which I might talk about in Torah study, where he's comparing these two texts. All year long, he's been going through every single Haftarah and writing a commentary on it. And he's a truly brilliant guy. But he points out some of these things that we see. And remember, Jacob, who becomes Israel, right? And King David. If you had to pick two people to think of who we are collectively associated with, right? Israel and the Magen David, right? That symbol of Judaism that we consider to be ubiquitous now means the shield of David. That symbol was what he wore on his shield and was his standard. Interlocking diamonds that we consider a Jewish star. It's not called a Jewish star. It's called a Magen David. Right? That's its real intention, right? So these are again complicated, flawed, but also in their best moments, really quite remarkable characters. So it makes sense that in the period where we're reading about Jacob's end, that we're going to also read about David's. And as you'll see, he doesn't go without some parting words and some instructions for his children that feel more. I often say it reminds me of The Godfather more than anything else. But you'll see what I mean in a second. First, we'll do our blessings, page 372. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hanemarim emet. Baruch atah Adonai abocher b'torah u'Moshe avdo b'Yisrael amo b'nviei hamet v'tzedek. When the time came near for David to die, he gave this instruction to his son Solomon: I am going the way of all the earth. You must now be strong and show yourself a man, and keep faith with the eternal your God, walking in God's ways, carrying out the laws, commandments, rules of justice, and directions of God, as written in the Torah of Moses, so that you may succeed in all that you do and whatever you turn to. In that way, the Eternal will see to it that the promise about me comes true. As God said, if your children are careful how they live and walk before me faithfully with all their heart and soul, one of your descendants will always rule Israel. Moreover, you know that Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me. Okay, this is where it gets vindictive. What he did to the two commanders of Israel's army, Avner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether, killing them and shedding war blood in peacetime, and spilling war blood upon the girdle hitched over his loins and upon the sandals on his feet. Do what you know is wise, and do not allow his gray head to descend in peace to Sheol. But be kind to the family of Barzillai of Gilead, and let them be among those who eat at your table, because they showed me friendship when I had to flee from your brother Absalom. There is also Shimi, son of Gera, and the Benjaminite from Bahurim. He cursed me with a terrible curse the time I went to Mahanaim, and then he came to meet me at the river Jordan, and I swore to him by God that I would not put him to the sword. But you must not treat him as though he were innocent. You are wise and know what to do with him. Send his bloody gray head down to Sheol. And then David slept with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. David ruled Israel for 40 years. He ruled 7 years in Hebron, 33 years in Jerusalem. And now Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his rule was secure and strong. See what I mean? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim tzadik b'chol hadorot ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer ve'oseh ha'medaber u'mekayim shekol devarav emet v'tzedek Al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al anivim ve'al Yom HaShabbat hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha v'leminucha lechavod u'tifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach Mvarchim otach yibarach shimcha befi kol chai tamid le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen.
Where's the city of David?
City of David
Is Jerusalem?
is a part of Jerusalem. So it's a bit of a contentious thing these days because technically speaking, what would be considered the city of David, which becomes the basis for the first sort of foundation of Jerusalem and where the temple is built the first time by Solomon, now exists in East Jerusalem, which is traditionally, the last 100 years, is a Arab neighborhood. And what happened was there was something called the City of David Foundation that, for excavating purposes, kept buying up lands and sort of forcefully ejecting people from homes and expanding it. And so on the one hand, archaeologically, they've found all sorts of really remarkable stuff. But on the negative side of things, they've done it in a way that at least I personally feel is not appropriate. So it's a little tricky. But if you wanted to, for example, today, go to visit the city of David, that basically is what is sort of considered. And you can see, like, remember when we were in Israel and we went to the Jewish Museum, the Israel Museum, and there was like that model of the second temple, right? So they have these like models of what it looked like and all of that. And, and Yerushalayim, its beginning point, right? What we see today is much more the second temple and Roman construction and Herod's construction and stuff like that. But all of that is built onto what was originally the city of David in a much smaller footprint and a much smaller temple. The original temple basically was the dimensions of the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary. It's only when Herod comes around and because he's got, Roman stuff going on that they built such opulence, right? And then you get the Kotel and all of that stuff, right? The Kotel is the last remaining piece of the retaining wall of the Temple Mount. And that's why, right, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is such a complicated thing because it's built on top of, right? And so you get, right, and you get, then it's a whole other thing, right? You get these guys who are, you're not supposed to, by the way, from a religious standpoint, you're not really supposed to go up on the Temple Mount because we don't know where the Holy of Holies was, and you're not supposed to have gone into it. So, but at the same time, then there are these fanatics who go up there and they purposely go and then have like a private prayer service so that they can say they were praying where the temple stood. And then of course that really makes the, Arab population not so thrilled about it. And then it's a whole to do. So whenever you hear about like a flare up of things in the old city, 99% of the time, that's what's happening. Somebody doing something. But to be fair, right, as a counterpoint, there's been a lot of destruction of what would have been very useful and interesting archaeology, right, by the Al-Aqsa, because they've basically underneath, right, you see the Dome of the Rock and you see the Al-Aqsa Mosque next to it, but below that are a whole bunch of spaces for prayer and study and all sorts of things. But in order to build those things, they had to excavate and throw out. So there are people who also go and sift through the, stuff that's been dug out to see if they can find, coins or oil lamps or things like that. It's a complicated place. But when he's talking about the city of David, that's what they're referring to, is really the sort of foundation of Jerusalem as our capital. So hence the complications of all these things. But it's life without a little complication, I suppose. Page 376, we'll offer a prayer for our country and then a prayer for the state of Israel. We will rise in body or spirit, your choice. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace, and may we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Amen. Prayer for the state of Israel, page 377. Avinu Shabbat Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Gulatim. Again, Aleha be'avrat chastecha, ufros aleha sukat shlomecha, Ushlach orcha v'amitcha l'rasheha, sareha v'yoatzeha. V'taknem be'etzah tova milfanecha, v'natata shalom ba'aretz, v'simchat olam le'yoshveha v'nomar. Amen. O Heavenly One, protector and redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. And we'll remain standing as we conclude the Torah service, page 374. Yeah, hallelujah, Shem Adonai, ki niskav Shem levado, Odo al Eretz v'shamayim, Vayaharem keren li'amot, Tehila lechol Chasidav libnei Yisrael, Am kerovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Ki lekach tov natati lachem, Torati al tazovu, et chaim ehi lamachasikim ba, v'tomecheha me'ushar, v'racheha darchei noam, v'chol netivoteha shalom. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh Chadesh Yaveinu kekedem. Remain standing as we turn to page 586 at the very bottom. Aleinu l'shabeach. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adon hakol, latet gdula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kiyoyeh ha'aratzot, velo samanu kamishmechot ha'adama, shelo samechelkinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamunam, anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, Bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, U'shemo echad. As those in mourning and those observing yard sites to please remain standing. Everyone else may be seated. Think first of those who have passed in our community in recent months. Leo Leibowitz, Dr. John Aberkin, Sylvia Alderman, Morris Dickstein, Linda Denath, Sandra Furman, Evelyn Gelb, Arthur Grossman, Elaine Grossman, Gerald Hirsch, Deirdre Klein, Jeanette Kopp, William Littman, Audrey Lubo, Morty Lynn, Jerry Monroe, Nancy Nagel, Harry Olstein, Geraldine Rosen, Harriet Roth, Jeannie Rubin, Howard Schreier, Dorothy Shupnick, Paul Silver, and Marlise Silverberg. And Blanche Sklar, Rita Sandra Snyder, Joan Strong Tangzilius, and Virginia Tizard. We also marked the yard sites that occurred during the last week for Harry Aberkin, Augusta Axelrod, Annie Bookstaver, Emil Brill, Aaron Gastworth, Mary Kirshner, Anton Jacob Kurz, Janet Leonard, Leah Levine, William Littman, Michael London, Rosalind Melankoff, Jacob Oberman, Richard Peak, Rudolph Proper, Lillian Ronick, Stephen Schenkel, Lisa Schneidman, Nina Schumann, Doris Serow, Melvin Serow, Abraham Abba Weinstein, Pearl Weinstein, Ralph Weinstein, and Rose Zuckerman. Does anyone else have a name of someone for whom you're saying Kaddish this morning? We'll rise as the mourners will join with me, either at home or here. Page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Ve'alma divrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon of yom echon of chayei dechol beit Yisrael. V'agalav v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam li'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom imrumav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael Amen.
Amen.
Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So a few announcements. Please join us for Torah study beginning at 12 o'clock on Zoom. A reminder that tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, we have a virtual book talk with our lovely, wonderful friend and member, Carl Grossman, who is a veteran journalist who's written a new book called Cold War Long Island, which brings to life the often overlooked history of the Cold War era in Nassau and Suffolk counties. And it really is a fascinating book, and Carl's a fascinating guy. It's open to all. It's on Zoom, 7 o'clock this Sunday, and I believe that our co-president, Ron Cosner, is going to be interviewing, which that should be very nice. Monday, Nimitz will be meeting at 11:30, Hebrew School at 3:30, Social Justice Committee at 5. Also, Monday evening at 7 o'clock, there is a virtual tour of the National Museum of Australia about the first Australians, co-sponsored with our Social Justice Committee. You'll learn about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, their history, culture, and connection to the country. It is a guided tour of the museum's largest exhibition gallery. So for those of us that probably won't get to Australia anytime soon, this is a great opportunity. Again, that's Monday, 7 o'clock.
The first Jewish Australians?
I do not believe this is about the first Jewish Australians.
Okay, good.
I don't think that would make for a very interesting conversation.
I'm trying to clarify.
The first Jewish Australians were probably criminals, so, you know,
Probably a Jewish guy in Sydney.
that's it, right? His name was Sidney.
Just one.
Sydney.
That's the city is named after him.
I went to a big shul in Sydney.
Oh, yeah.
Huge.
He must be humongous, yeah. Well, that's what happens in a lot of places where the Jewish population is centralized, right? Even in a gigantic country like Australia, people don't realize how big of a country it is,
Oh.
right? But its population of Jews is actually fairly located really in Melbourne and Sydney, and I think to a lesser degree in Perth. But beyond that, it's like you might find one or two of them, you know, wandering around here and there. So
Why are we
it,
going there? I mean, so why are we doing this? Just to-
you know, it's actually this
That's
is,
the reason why I have questions.
well, so it's co-sponsored by the Social Justice Committee. So I imagine that there is some
Okay.
social awareness learning that is taking
Okay.
place in it. But it is an excellent question. This one I don't have an answer for,
That's all
but
right, that's
but
okay.
hopefully we're going to find out. We're going to find out on Monday at 7 o'clock.
Because it just didn't make.
No. I understand. I hear that. It's a valid question to ask. I should know more to answer that question, and I don't. So
First Australia.
yeah, first Australia. Wednesday class at 12 o'clock. There is no Hebrew school on Wednesday. This Thursday at 7 o'clock, we present Film Shul, a free, informative, engaging, and interactive presentation on Zoom about Hollywood's great Jewish filmmakers with noted film historians Irv Slifkin and Lawrence Lerman. My Friday class is at 9:15. There is no Shabbat Together program that day. And a reminder again, because next Shabbat is Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, we will not be having in-person services for either Friday night or for Saturday morning. Both will be on Zoom. So Marsha's very excited. You will get, just pay attention to this coming week's e-blast and the Shabbat reminder, and it will have the links and the Zoom and all that stuff. And, given the way that COVID is going these days, maybe it might be that way. We'll see, Beyond that, very important. January, thanks very much to the leadership of our Women's Torah Commentary group that we have arranged for a great opportunity of learning on January 9th from 11 to 1 o'clock. There'll be a little bit of a break for, in between the 2 hours is a long session. So we'll have a little bit of a break, but we're very honored to welcome our master teacher for that Sunday, Rabbi Minna Bromberg, who is going to be teaching us all the way from Israel. Because the timing of it worked out in such a way, normally we do Women's Torah Commentary Shabbat's Torah study on the first of the month, or the first Shabbat of the month. This year we've moved it. It's going to be January 8th. Leah's going to lead that. That's Shabbat morning. It really wasn't possible for Minna to be able to teach during that time period because of the time difference. So Sunday will be an opportunity to learn with her. So it's really an extended opportunity to engage with our Women's Torah Commentary and with a great teacher and with the subject matter and a parsha that's really fascinating, Parshat Bo. So I want to thank again Ruth and Leah and Margaret as well for helping to arrange all of that. And it's a great opportunity that you do not want to miss. Again, open to all. And if you have friends who you think might be interested, please bring them along on Zoom. So with that, we'll wish, certainly because we're not going to see them in prayer. Howard, I'm sure I'll see you before you go down. But Morty, I may not see you before you leave for Florida. So we wish you both a Nesiya Tova, a good sojourning. Just return to us in health and speedily. Come back sooner than later. That's the most important thing. And if you're really missing me, you just send me a ticket. I'll come right down. Okay. Good. So let's end our service It's
I don't know who's doing spring training there.
yeah. Well, if it's the Mets, I don't know. You know, although they spent a considerable amount of money lately, so who knows? Money might make them
They do
better.
it more on the West Coast.
They're in Port St. Lucie, so I don't know where that is.
Port St. Lucie is near us.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do that. That just seems like a lot of fun. You know,
On the West Coast, they have.
right? They have them on the West Coast too, right? In Arizona.
Took my grandson.
Oh, must have loved that.
Tampa,
In a camper, that's cool. That's cool.
Tampa. But St. Lucie is between us, it's north of Palm Beach before Vero, where I am.
It's a pretty brilliant thing, right? Whoever came up with that idea, right? You know, get everybody to a nice place, let them play baseball for a couple weeks, you know, putz around.
It's a good gimmick.
Yeah, and it's a good gimmick also for the people because it's these smaller towns, right? So they get business, and the kids that grow up there get to see it. Yeah, and then you get to, and instead of being, in the 800th row like I normally am at Citi Field, right? They're right there in front of you. They'll sign baseballs, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Someday I'll get down. All right. In the meanwhile, we'll do Adon Olam, page 625. Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol yetzir nivra le'et nasa b'chefto kol azai melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora ve'hu haya ve'hu hoveh והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד ואין שני, להמשילו להכבירה, בלי ראשית בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, וצורכם לי בצרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא בידו, הפקיד רוחי, ותישן מהעירה, ועם רוחי גביעתי, אדוני לי ולא יגרע. I'll turn back to page 604 for Kiddush. 604. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. על כן ברך אדוני יום השבת ויקדשהו סברי. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. Boy, what a difference it is to be able to sing with full breath. It's like, honest, I think this is the first Shabbos where I've had no coughs, like
I was
none.
gonna say, you sounded so much better last night I thought there was nobody there last night.
There weren't a ton of people, that's,
Because the sound, it seemed to have been so much better.
interesting. So that might be